Hello everybody, I'm Sandie La Nae, and thank you for and welcome to Psychic Creations. As you know, I am a psychic who uses stones as my tool to give intuitive readings. Now, stones have played a very important part in jewelry down through the ages, as they are used as talisman pendants and to show authority, royalty, and station in lots of different necklaces and crowns. Now, rings have stood the time with their shapes meaning, and then also with the stones set in them as tokens of love and commitment. And with today's show, Psychic Creations, we are going to be talking about the history of rings. Now, the use of rings as tokens, I've got my cheat sheets here because I can't memorize anything. The use of rings as tokens is as ancient as a custom of wearing rings. Now, this includes lip rings, neck rings, nose rings, bracelets and anklets, and earrings. All of these were known to be in use in prehistoric times. But the custom of wearing finger rings was not common in the primitive societies. And one reason for that is because, well, rings could get in the way, they could interfere with mundane tasks. And I'm sure that if you wear a lot of rings like I do, they can easily get caught on, well, lots of things. Now, many feel that the ring was an Egyptian innovation for the wealthy members, but only rings in the form of signets were used to seal documents, thus ensuring their authenticity. But possession of a signet ring meant authority and power. And then, as a result, finger rings quickly rose to the status of jewelry. Among the ancient Greeks, the origin of finger rings is connected with the idea of a pledge and keeping something on your mind. For example, after Zeus released Prometheus from the never-ending torture of the mountains of Caucasus, the rebellious god had to wear a finger ring forged from the links of the iron chain and adorned with a piece of the rock to which he had been chained to the mountains for centuries. Now, this sounds like an early promise ring with the simple message, I shall respect the will of Zeus. Well, that'll make sure it stays on his mind forever and ever. Okay, let's first talk about the promise rings. Our lives are full of promises. You're going to go pick someone up at the airport. You're going to help a child with a school project, or I'm going to volunteer to pick up the groceries after work today. But there are special kinds of promises that are meant to last a long time. And these promises are very beneficial to both parties. And so, with this specialness, eons ago, mankind developed a practice of offering tokens that serve as reminders of such important promises. It seems fitting that promise rings were chosen as the ultimate token of human commitment. One variation of a promise ring was the betrothal ring, which was well known in ancient Rome. The betrothal ring was composed of two rings that had an oval plate with the engraved names of the betrothed couple. Now, these rings were originally made out of inexpensive iron before gold became a popular metal. Posy rings had their peak in popularity in England during the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries as promise rings. They were given as tokens of love, affection, and the prospect of marriage. Now, these rings were known for the charming short love poems that were inscribed inside or on the outside of the ring. And what made this ring popular was the fact that these promise rings were quite affordable. As an aside, it is interesting that the very term promise ring appears to be rather recent. In the Dictionary of Jewelry, the promise ring was only noted first in the 1970s. Promise rings symbolize exclusive monogamous relationships. When a couple has no intention of marriage or even an engagement, but want to affirm that strong commitment to each other, a promise ring is given. In today's society, one or both parties can wear a promise ring. A newer version of the promise ring is the pre-engagement ring. If a couple feels that there is another step in their relationship, a stronger commitment, but yet engagement is just still too far off, a pre-engagement ring is given to symbolize exclusive monogamous relationships. Now, also to hit the recent market is another promise ring by the name of purity rings. And this ring indicates the wearer's desire to abstain from intimate activities. Now, it is very common after the purity rings are given that a ceremony is followed with the signing of a document that further asserts the agreement between the ring wearers. That is both male and female teenagers. Usually a parent or parents of both parties suggest the ceremony. Now, purity rings are intended to be worn until the wedding day, when they are replaced with wedding rings. The history of the engagement ring. An engagement ring indicates that a person wearing it is engaged to be married. It is presented as a betrothal gift to a man to his prospective spouse while he proposes marriage or directly after she accepts the marriage proposal. Now, in Western cultures, engagement rings are traditionally worn by the woman, but in other cultures, men and women wear the engagement rings. The engagement ring can be reliably traced back to ancient Rome. It is said the engagement rings is placed on the finger nearest the little finger on the left hand. At one time, it was believed that this finger contained the vena humerus, a vein that led directly to the heart vein. In 2nd century BC, the Roman bride-to-be was given 2 rings, one gold that she wore in public, and then one that was iron that she wore at home for doing her household duties. The Middle Ages. The mid-17th century Visigothic code required that when the ceremony of a betrothal has been performed, and the ring shall be given to or accepted as a pledge, although nothing may be committed in writing, the promise shall under no circumstances be broken. Renaissance times. The first well-documented use of a diamond ring to signify engagement was by the Archduke Maximilian of Austria in imperial court in Vienna in 1477 upon his betrothal to Mary of Burgundy. This then influenced those of higher social class and of significant wealth to start to give diamond engagement rings to their loved ones. So good old Max, he's the one that started this diamond ring engagement tradition. In early colonial New England, from the 1500s to the 1600s, where Puritans shunned ornaments and jewels, a thimble was substituted for an engagement ring. Some of the women would remove the top of the thimble and then wear that as an engagement ring. Now, during the Age of Enlightenment, from the 1600s to the 1700s, both the posy ring and gimel ring, which we'll talk about in a moment, were quite popular as engagement rings. Victorian era, diamonds. By 1872, the output of the diamond mines exceeded 1 million carats per year. As production increased, those of lesser means could now join in on the movement of giving their loved ones a diamond engagement ring. The 20th century. In the United States, the popularity of a diamond engagement ring really declined after World War I, and even more so with the onset of the Great Depression as the price of diamonds collapsed. In 1938, the diamond cartel, De Beers, began a marketing campaign that would have a major impact on engagement rings. One of the first elements of this campaign was to educate the public on the 4 C's: cut, carats, color, and clarity. 4 very important facets when you're buying an engagement ring. In 1947, the slogan, "A diamond is forever," was introduced. Ultimately, the De Beers campaign sought to persuade the consumer that an engagement ring is indispensable and is the only acceptable stone for an engagement ring. Well, the campaign was very successful because in 1939, only 10% of the engagement rings had diamonds. But in the 1990 census, 80% of the engagement rings had diamonds. Now, the idea that a man should spend a significant fraction of his annual income for an engagement ring originated from the De Beers marketing campaign. In the 1930s, they suggested that a man should spend an equivalent of 1 month's income on an engagement ring. Now later they changed that and they suggested that a man should spend 2 months' income on an engagement ring. Now, in a census taken in 2007, the average cost of an engagement ring in the United States, as reported by the industry, was $2,100. Now, there was a reason for the increased popularity of expensive engagement rings: its relationship to human sexuality and the woman's marriage prospects in the early days. Up until the Great Depression, a man who broke off a marriage engagement could be sued for breach of promise. Monetary damages included actual expenses incurred in preparing for the marriage, plus damages for emotional distress and loss of other marriage prospects. Now, beginning in 1935, those laws were repealed or limited. However, the social and financial cost of a broken engagement was no less. Marriage was the only financially sound option for a woman. And if she was no longer pure, her prospects for a suitable future marriage were greatly decreased. The diamond engagement ring thus became a source of financial security for the woman. Now, who exactly owns an engagement ring? Check out this complicated set of rules of who actually owns an engagement ring if there happens to be a breakup. Tradition commonly holds that if a man breaks off the engagement, he is not obligated in any way to have that ring returned to him, as the ring's role is a form of compensation for the woman's damaged reputation. Legally, this condition can be subject to modification or a strict fault rule. Under the former, the fiancé can demand the return of the ring unless he breaks the engagement. Under the latter, he is entitled to the return unless his actions caused the breakup of relationship. However, a no-fault rule is set in some jurisdictions under which the fiancé is always entitled to the return of the ring. The ring only becomes property of the woman upon marriage. Now, an unconditional gift approach is another possibility wherein the ring is always treated as a gift to be kept by the fiancé, whether or not the relationship progresses to marriage. Now, in some recent court rulings, have determined that the date in which the ring was offered can determine the condition of the gift, such as Valentine's Day and Christmas Day are nationally recognized as gift-giving holidays. So if a ring is offered as a Christmas present, that ring will likely remain the personal property of the recipient in an event of a breakup. But in most states of the United States, engagement rings are considered conditional gifts under the legal rules of personal property. There is an exception to this general rule that gifts cannot be revoked once properly given. But the so-called modern trend holds that because an engagement ring is an inherently conditional gift, once the engagement has been broken, the ring should be returned to the donor. Thus, the question of who broke the engagement and why or who is at fault is completely irrelevant. Give candy. It's less complicated. Okay, do you know just where to wear an engagement ring? Well, in North America and the United Kingdom, engagement rings are customarily worn on the left hand finger ring. But in Germany, the ring is worn on the left hand while engaged and moved to the right hand upon marriage. And in Poland, the engagement ring and the wedding ring are worn on the right hand. Who wears the engagement ring, you ask? Well, in some countries, it is common for both men and women to wear engagement rings. In many Lutheran factions, the man wears the engagement ring, often in the form of a plain metal band. The engagement ring eventually serves as the wedding band for the man. In Brazil, the groom and bride-to-be usually wear a plain wedding band on the right hand during the course of their engagement, and then the band is moved over to the left hand upon marriage. In Argentina, the groom and bride-to-be wear a plain silver band on the left hand while engaged, and then it is replaced with the rings of their choice upon marriage. Now, traditionally, women in the British Isles can propose marriage to a man during a leap year. Women's proposals have become more common in recent years that many jewelry companies have started manufacturing men's engagement rings, which are usually a band with a diamond centerpiece. Wonder where they got that idea. Now, wedding ring history. Historians believe that Egypt started the tradition, most like our modern wearing of a wedding band, as archaeological discoveries has led them to this conclusion. Imagery on artifacts, such as papyrus scrolls, reveal ancient cultures exchanged rings braided by hemp or reeds. And through translated hieroglyphics, experts learned that the society viewed the circle as a symbol of endless love between a couple. Now, in ancient Rome, there were 3 recognized types of marriages, categorized by social class. One was an informal union reserved for the lowest class, often compared to today's common law marriage. Now, the second type of marriage involved purchasing one's bride. Historians believe that this is more symbolic than true, but yet still, many brides their fathers were paid for their hands in marriage. Now, the third marriage was reserved for the elite class and was the only legal form of marriage. The union was officiated with the groom presenting a ring to his bride, and most rings were made of iron, which then led to the popularity of metal wedding rings. But unlike Egyptian symbols of love, Romans viewed these bands as symbols of possession. The wife belonged to the husband. Now, there have been some interesting wedding rings down through the ages, puzzle rings. Centuries ago in the Middle East, a man would give his wife a puzzle ring. This piece of jewelry was several rings, actually, that when worn together formed a cohesive band. Faithfulness was the idea behind this design. If a woman took off her ring, say to have a tryst, the ring would come undone and she couldn't put it back together again. Therefore, the husband knew that she had been unfaithful. Gimel rings. The gimel ring was quite popular in Europe during the 15 and 1600s. Its design was meant to signify marriage and unity and is composed of two interlocking bands with a hand shape at each end, which were clasping when the ring was together. Now, after the couples became engaged, a bride and groom would wear one of the rings, and then at their wedding, the couple would connect their bands and to form one ring, which the bride would wear. Posy rings, here we are again. Engagement rings with the inscriptions of loved were used as well as wedding rings, engagement rings, and promise rings. They were just all over the place, weren't they? And then again, the thimbles. In colonial America, a groom would give his bride a thimble as jewelry was frivolous, but a thimble was acceptable because it was a practical item. There again, the women would remove the top and use that as a wedding ring. As a piece of trivia, I wanted to add this information. The Virginia Street Bridge legend. Nevada is one of the first states to relax its divorce laws. And as a result, people began coming to Reno starting in the early 1900s to get a quickie divorce with basically no questions asked. During the 1930s, over 30,000 divorces were granted in the Washoe County Courthouse. Getting a Reno divorce was called getting renovated. The Washoe County Courthouse in downtown Reno is about a block south of the Virginia Street Bridge, which was built in 1905 over the Truckee River. There is a story that divorcees, after obtaining their final dissolution of marriage decree, would kiss a column on the courthouse portico, then walk to the Virginia Street Bridge and toss their wedding rings into the waters of the Truckee River. Now, evidence of this comes from divers having found many rings over the ensuing years. But you know, pawn shops are kind of just right around the corner, too. Memorial rings. Specialty rings just don't stop with love, commitment, and marriage. Rings can be given as a symbol of remembrance. Memorial rings were once very popular among people who wish to be remembered after their deaths by their friends and family. Shakespeare, for instance, bequeathed rings to a number of friends so he would not be forgotten. Now, I'd like to leave off with a quote from Elizabeth Taylor. My mother said I did not open my eyes for the first 8 days I was born. But when I did, the first thing I saw was an engagement ring, and I was hooked forever. If you would like to have an intuitive stone reading with me and my rings, please look to my website, which is www.sandiepsychicstones.com for the information on how to have a reading. And thank you very much for watching Psychic Creations, and we'll see you next show.